Welcome in to a Wednesday episode of Hornets Daily, your one-stop shop for all things Charlotte Hornets. As always, we're presented by the good people over at FanArc, and I'm your host, Vance Ballard, but you know by now, you can call me VB. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, watching along with us. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, leave a like and a comment down in the comment section. As you know, we enjoy watching you guys interact down there, seeing some of your thoughts on what's going on the show, and continuing to grow and build this Hornets Daily family here on the program. Now, it's early in September, a slow time in the NBA. It's one day away from the NFL season kicking off, but that does not for any means mean that the docket here today is empty. We've got a few things going on, still some buzz going on in the Queen City, and we're going to bring it all to you here on today's episode. The Hornets are still receiving a lot of offseason praise for the moves that they made, specifically the Sexton trade. That is still considered quite a fleece and a big win for the Hornets in that move. The draft night trade that led to the Hornets acquiring McNeely is also getting a lot of love and praise. We're going to discuss a little bit about both of those trades today here on the show. Just kind of celebrate the Hornets, give them some much needed love and appreciation, as it is very rare the offseason goes the way of the Charlotte Hornets the way that this one has. And it wouldn't be an episode of Hornets Daily if we didn't talk a little bit about our favorite and most popular Charlotte Hornet, LaMelo Ball. We're going to discuss a little bit about what the Hornets should do or could do with him on the offensive end of the floor this year. We'll talk about that today. And then we're going to wrap the show up with a little bit of expectations, a little bit of talk about this Charlotte Hornets offense. I'll tell you, we all know how bad they were last year. I'll be a little more specific about that as we get there, and then discuss what the realistic expectations could potentially be for the Charlotte Hornets offense going forwards this year. You know, we don't beat around the bush here on Hornets Daily, not something I'm fond of. We like to dive head first right into the program, and that's exactly what we're going to do here today. Now, as I mentioned, it has been a very rare offseason for the Hornets. They have been victorious in a couple of their trades. They've come out on top of a couple of their moves. Their draft choices have been complimented. It's just been uncharted territory for the Hornets fan base for quite some time. As we've grown accustomed, if you hear the word fleeced and it involves a trade featuring the Charlotte Hornets, we have grown to accustomed to it being the Hornets on the bad side or on the losing side or on the negative side of that word fleeced. But that is not the case this summer, specifically in the Sexton trade. We all know that the Hornets were able to send Jusuf Nurkic out to Utah in return for Sexton and a 2030 second-round pick. So that in itself pretty much gave the Hornets the win there, allowing for an upgrade, not at the same position because they don't play the same position, but allowing for the Hornets to receive an upgrade in player quality over Nurkic with Sexton, and then sending an asset back along with it, just added to the victory or the fleecing, if you will, that the Hornets put on the Utah Jazz in that trade. That move sent some ripples through the NBA, as most analysts and experts, writers, even front office staff were kind of taken aback. We're a little bit shocked that that's all it took for the Hornets to receive Sexton. And not only did they get a better player, they got a better deal. Sexton comes in on a much better contract. This is the end of the last year of his deal. He's only making $18 million compared to the almost $20 that it was going to cost the Hornets to keep Nurkic around. So that too is advantageous for the Hornets. Again, this trade was thought of basically right from the jump as a win for the Hornets, and that was rare in itself. But as we have gotten further and further away from it, it seems that the strength behind the Hornets winning that trade seems to continue to grow and build, and it just seems more and more each day like the Hornets were bigger and bigger winners in that trade. Nurkic is an aging big man that we all know about. It wasn't bad for the Hornets by any means, but it didn't seem like that was going to be the fit. He certainly wasn't going to be the big man of the future here, or the franchise five if you will. He was not going to play that position by any means. And as I mentioned, he is a little more expensive than the Hornets would have liked to been paying just to keep a guy around who, I mean, he could have given some quality minutes, but he certainly isn't going to be the future. Doesn't really fit the plan for what the Hornets have going and have laid out this offseason. Sexton, however, does seem to be fitting in with this Hornets team, fitting in with this Hornets organization quite nicely during his time in Charlotte. We've heard a couple comments from him saying that he very much enjoys his time here. We've seen him and LaMelo together trying to build that relationship between them two, whether they end up playing on the court or off the court together. That still remains to be seen, but we have seen him putting forth the effort to get comfortable, to get adjusted, and to fit right in with this Hornets team. And I think he's going to be a major part of the roster this year. He's one of the better scorers that the Hornets have on their roster right now. Just by adding him, he jumped up high into that category. And if he is to come off the bench this season, with Trey Mann and Colin Sexton coming off the bench, that's just another added offensive weapon that the Hornets could use when the second unit is on the floor. Now, if none of this is the case, the Hornets decide to move on from him, and they don't want to keep Colin Sexton, or it just isn't working the way they think it is, then he has a much higher trade value overall than Jusuf Nurkic, I believe. So if they are to move Colin Sexton and get a haul in return for it, that just makes the Jazz trade look that much worse for the Jazz. And getting a pick in this trade, as we mentioned, only sweetened the pot, only added to the deal for the Hornets, was the cherry on top of this move, if you will, as they were able to potentially bring in a future asset, and if not, use that trade to package in a package deal to get another asset. So either way, if the Hornets are to use Colin Sexton, or if that second round pick gets involved in a trade package, then the Hornets will only increase their victory over the Utah Jazz in that trade. It's only going to look worse for them, and I think that's more than likely what's going to happen, at least with the pick. I'm not in the camp that Colin Sexton is going to be moved. I could be wrong about that, but I do think he's going to carve himself out a nice little niche, a nice little bit of playing time here in Charlotte, whether it be off the bench or in the starting role. That part still remains to be seen. But I do believe that Sexton is going to find himself a nice little spot here in Charlotte, and even in that regard, it's going to be a win for the Hornets. The trade is only going to keep looking better and better and better for the Hornets, and worse and worse and worse for the Jazz. Now, again, I'm not trying to poo-poo the Jazz or talk bad about them by any means. They're obviously in the middle of a rebuild, but they definitely allowed for the Hornets to take advantage of them here and acquire a much better player and put themselves in a much better position offensively with Colin Sexton than they would have just holding on to and paying Nurkic for this season as well. Now, that's not the only trade that the Hornets are getting praise for. I know it keeps getting more and more rare. It keeps getting crazier and crazier. I have to pinch myself too, thinking that the Hornets are continuing to receive compliments on some decisions their front office has been making, on the moves they've made in the offseason. It feels like the Twilight Zone, folks, but I promise this is the reality we live in now. Jeff Peterson and company are changing things here in Charlotte. The Liam McNeely trade is also receiving a lot of love, receiving a lot of praise, and it seems like a win. It could even potentially, if things turn out right in McNeely, continues to show the promise that he has so far this offseason. It could turn into being the steal of the draft in this year's draft class. We know how the Hornets acquired this pick for Liam McNeely. We know they sent Mark Williams out to Phoenix in return for what would become the 29th overall draft pick and Liam McNeely. Now, we know that moving Mark Williams, it was something the Hornets wanted to do. Obviously, this was the second attempt to trade him, as they tried to move him out to Los Angeles to the Lakers in return for Dalton Knecht and a few other pieces earlier in the season, but that trade was called off really after it was already announced, basically after Mark Williams already had his bags packed, and we thought Knecht was going to be a Hornet. That trade was called off. But over time, with some work and some perseverance, the Hornets did find a suitor for Mark Williams. He's now a Phoenix Sun. again, having allowed for them to draft Liam McNeely, another young, promising player who maybe should not have been there at 29 in the first place. He did fall a little bit, but there was some concerns about his defensive game, about his age overall, and a little bit of concerns about his health coming in, but that seems to have been taken care of. We know he did miss 2 games in the summer league due to some Achilles tendonitis, but I think that was more just precautionary, trying to rest him up, especially after he performed so well in the first 2 games that we really kind of have seen all we need to see from him in the summer league action, as he was able to shine brightly in both his performances, answer some questions about his rebounding ability, his defensive ability, his overall athleticism, and then the Hornets felt comfortable shutting him down, allowing him to get back to full health going into this training camp and preseason schedule that is out in front. I mentioned McNeely shining in his first 2 preseason games, and he's continued to do so at practice and at workouts. He's also been raved about his leadership ability, his communication while on the court, despite only being 19 years old, one of the many young guys on this Hornets roster. McNeely is very vocal at practice. He comes from a Dan Hurley coached college team, so he understands quality communication, hard practice, and doing what it takes to get the wins and grind and kind of get it gritty down there in the dirt and really just compete. That's what McNeely brings to the table. That's just some more added features as to why he was able to be drafted. It feels like that Liam McNeely could have a very long and impactful career here in Charlotte, not just Con Knippel being one of the main guys out of this draft class, but McNeely could be a long-term Hornet, could be here for a while, and really help this team out as he continues to develop, gets a little bit older, gets more mature, kind of understands the NBA game a little bit more. Add all that with the skills that he already brings to the NBA, and it could be a very long career here in Charlotte. There's a good chance, as I said, it's going to turn into a draft night steal, that in a few years we're all going to be sitting here looking back, talking, and just thinking, wow, it was crazy that Liam McNeely was still sitting there at the 29th pick in the draft. Moving on from a player that I don't want to say didn't really want, because that feels like the wrong wording to describe Mark Williams, but moving on from a player you didn't necessarily think was going to fit, you kind of understood what you were getting from Mark Williams, and he wasn't necessarily part of the plan, so being able to move on from him and turning that into what could potentially be the steal of the draft, what could be a long-term addition for your team, is a massive victory, and honestly feels like a little bit of uncharted territory for the Hornets, much like this entire first 2 segments have. The Hornets receiving offseason praise. Again, feels like the Twilight Zone. Feels like something weird is going on. We're just not used to it, but it is the normal. It is the normal now that Jeff Peterson and company are trying to build, are trying to make this fan base grow accustomed to, is that it is a successful offseason. There are smart decisions being made in the front office, and this team is truly serious about turning into a competitor and becoming a real contender in the Eastern Conference. One of the ways they're going to maybe have to do that is going to be some changes, some alterations, some fixes to the way they run their offense, the way they do things on that end of the floor. And as you all know, it just would not be an episode of Hornets Daily if we did not discuss LaMelo Ball, the most popular, the most talked about, and the most polarizing member of the Charlotte Hornets currently. Now, we've said on the show that this is the most talent LaMelo has had around him all year. As a matter of fact, I said that yesterday. The most talent he's had around him, the best roster that the Hornets have assembled for him since he has been a member of the organization. But it does still pose a lot of questions as to how LaMelo is going to be able to mesh with them, what they're going to do with LaMelo Ball, how are the Hornets going to capitalize on some of these offensive weapons that they have added around him. Now, this could potentially be one of the first times that we have seen in LaMelo's career him being featured more as an off-ball offensive weapon on that end of the floor. The Hornets have brought in, as we have talked about several times, an abundance of guards, multiple guys who can be that primary ball handler. Spencer Dinwiddie's one of them. We know Trey Mann can come off the bench and handle the ball as well. But specifically, this conversation in terms of moving LaMelo off the ball a little is going to be in reference to Colin Sexton and Melo being on the floor at the same time. We know Colin Sexton, he's been a primary ball handler at multiple stops in his career. That was his duty coming off the bench in Utah. He split those duties as a starter with Darius Garland and Cleveland, so there is a lot of comfortability when talking about Colin Sexton at the point guard position as the primary ball handler, being the guy bringing the ball up the court. And if he is asked to play that role in Charlotte, it's something he can slip right into and won't be hesitant about. There will be no real major concerns about Colin Sexton being that primary ball handler, whether LaMelo is on the court with him or sitting on the bench as well. Now, I know taking the ball out of LaMelo's hand may sound a little bit counterproductive. We know playing with the ball in his hand is kind of what he does. It allows for him to create his space that way, crash the glass, kick out, or crash the lane, kick out to open shooters, all of the above. That does kind of take those things out of LaMelo's hands if he is playing off ball. But it also has its advantages as well. Sexton having the ball allows for LaMelo to get himself into some space without the ball, find his spots, get to those spots, cut to the lanes, and it also attracts the defense elsewhere. Colin Sexton being the man with the ball, obviously the defense will have to pay a little more attention to him. If LaMelo can find a way to get to his spots, get to his places where he feels comfortable catching and shooting, that's going to be to his advantage as he comes in. He shot 36.7% off the catch and shoot last year. We know those numbers can go up a little bit, but if he has more opportunities to shoot off the catch, that should increase the percentage as well. Should help those numbers go up a little bit, but 36.7% from the catch and shoot, honestly better than I thought it was going to be for LaMelo in the first place. Having Sexton play more on the ball, having LaMelo be the secondary ball handler when he's on the court with Colin Sexton also would allow for less wear and tear on his body, as he won't be the one crashing into the lane every time, as he won't be the one drawing all of the fouls, taking the hits, falling onto the floor. It allows for his body to have a little more his body to get a little more rest even while still being on the court. It's not going to require him to throw up crazy layups as he's falling down, going out of bounds. Just a little less pressure off of him and off his body as a whole, with Colin Sexton playing that primary ball handler role while he's on the floor with LaMelo. So I do think it's going to benefit the Hornets to play LaMelo more as an off-ball guy this year. I think he'll find a sense of comfortability after a brief adjustment period of not having the ball in his hands every time. And that's not me saying at all that Colin Sexton is going to turn into the point guard for this team. LaMelo obviously going to be the predominant primary ball handler, but having a guy like Colin Sexton, even having someone like Spencer Dinwiddie and Trey Mann come off the bench as well, really opens up the options for the Hornets. It allows for them to have LaMelo Ball be that secondary ball handler, move around and open up his offensive game a little bit more without the ball. It allows for other guys to be able to crash the lane, kick out to those open shooters, LaMelo being one of them, and we know shooting is something he thrives at as well. So that just is another advantage, another key piece to this Hornets offense, something we know is going to be very closely watched and paid attention to, even scrutinized quite heavily this year, because that's going to be a major point of conversation. It's going to be something everyone's keeping their eye on. The Hornets have a lot of expectations offensively coming off of what was an almost historically bad offensive performance last year. That's what we're going to wrap the show up with. As I said earlier, we're going to talk a little bit now about some of the realistic expectations for the Hornets offense. How much better can we expect them to be, should they be, going into this 25-26 season? Obviously, it's been all of the talk we know. If it's not about the depth at the center position, it's been about fixing the offense. That's what has been the main point of conversation for the Hornets this season, and rightfully so. Last year, as I mentioned, was basically a historically bad year on offense for the Hornets. They were last in the league in points per game, 28th in the league in field goals made per game, last in true shooting percentage, and 28th 28th in turnover percentage and 25th in turnovers per contest. So that just about as bad as you can get. Again, almost historically bad numbers, basement level stuff for the Charlotte Hornets offense. So you hear that and you think there's really nowhere to go but up. And I'd be inclined to agree with that. It's been bad, and I mean very bad on offense for the Hornets for a while now, probably peaking with last year, hopefully peaking with last year, and now the only place the Hornets can go is up, especially if you're looking at just on paper. On paper, this roster has taken massive steps to remedy all of their offensive problems. They've taken major steps forward in their abilities on offense, just on paper. That is, adding proven scorers like Colin Sexton, Spencer Dinwiddie, even Pat Connaughton as a proven shooter, if he stays on the roster, can almost instantly increase the team's shooting percentage. Overall, guys like that can really help bring in one of the most promising, if not the most promising overall rookie class that the Hornets have drafted in my memory. Will also go a long way. Two of those guys we know come in with great offensive games as well. Sion James, a pretty good shooter, someone I think that the team is comfortable with allowing him to carve out a bit of an offensive niche for him. And Ryan Kalkbrenner is in the process of developing. He's not a bad offensive player. There just is still some questions as to how he'll adapt to an NBA offense, getting out of having played in the same system for the last 5 years. Is there going to be a learning curve with Kalkbrenner moving in to this new Hornets offense? So he is not the most certain offensive piece, but he should develop into another offensive weapon here for the Hornets, as he can already shoot the basketball from really all over the floor. We know he's been told to let it fly when he's out there and has an open look from three. We know Charles Lee loves big men who can shoot the three. So that could be a very important addition in the long term. Kalkbrenner could be a sneaky big draft pick for this Hornets coming out of the 25-26 class. Despite all the added help and the talent, though, a realistic goal is not necessarily a great offense. We're not taking leaps and bounds, jumping into a top 5, top 10 offense in the league. I think an average or just above average offense is probably the most realistic expectations for this Hornets offense this year. At first, it's obviously going to take a bit of an adjustment period. We talked about that yesterday and a little bit more today in reference to LaMelo, but not just LaMelo. This rebuilt roster is going to have to go through a bit of an adjustment period as a whole, learning to play together, learning what each and every person's role is going to be, kind of understanding the other guys' tendencies that you're out on the floor with. Now, obviously, training camp, preseason will help that, but there is no real replication. There's no real duplicate for live game NBA minutes, and that's what it's going to take for this Hornets roster to mesh a little bit, all the new pieces to come together and figure things out, especially on the offensive end. But it should still, even if they don't really mesh, even if it just doesn't seem like it's going the right way, just based on their talent level, their skills, and their offensive ability, this team should get better at the very least from a shooting percentage standpoint, just because the guys they've added are good shooters. We know they can take and make their shots. As the season unfolds, I think there is a chance that this team can develop into a decent offensive team, someone that's not necessarily laughed at or mocked or scoffed at when you talk about the Hornets offense. It is something that is going to get some eyeballs perked up. Some people are going to start paying attention to this Hornets offense as they continue to develop into what could potentially be a very good offense going forward if this young core develops and these young guys improve and take steps forward the way we think they are. This coaching staff, we know, very good at developing young talent. So if they can continue to do that, then it won't be long before this offense is taken seriously and becomes a real problem here in the NBA. The Hornets have set themselves up to where if they are healthy, that's a big if they are healthy, if LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller can stay on the floor, if the guys at the big man position, specifically the centers that are listed, if they can stay healthy, we know they're not very deep there, but if they can stay healthy along with the added depth at the wing position that the Hornets have brought in, this could be a very promising season. This offense could take that next step forward and continue to prove that they are going to be a good offense down the line. This team is building something in the future. As I said, obviously one of the biggest questions on the offensive end overall on the team, we talk about it every day, would not be a Hornets Daily if we didn't discuss at least a little bit of the center position. We know that's going to be one of the biggest questions on both ends of the floor, but especially on offense. I mentioned a little bit about Kalkbrenner and his ability to shoot the basketball. He can score in the paint, but he doesn't bring a lot of confidence or a lot of certainty in what he's able to do in the NBA just yet. We have seen Tajon Salon and Moussa Diabate working hard on their offensive games this summer. Salon looked really good in the summer league as he looks to have developed a little bit of a jump shot, a bit of a turnaround game as well. We've seen Moussa working on both of those things. If those two guys can take the next step, maybe even the next 2 steps this year offensively, develop a jump shot, make those jump shots, and become more of offensive threats from outside of the paint themselves, that will also increase the Hornets' offensive ability and just kind of put them on the radar on that side of the ball. Now, if Charlotte can find a way to get just mere competence out of the center position, which, as you know, I think they will. I'm very high. I'm higher than most on the guys they currently have on the roster. I think they will be, at the very least, competent. Then I think this offense should improve tenfold going into this season. The moves the Hornets made this offseason and at the draft should be more than enough to get this offense out of the basement of the NBA and at least up there somewhere average or middle of the pack. I know you don't want to cheer for that, but based on what we've seen in the past, average or middle of the pack offense would be a massive improvement for this Hornets team. Defenses now have a few more options to worry about. It's not just LaMelo Ball. It's not just Brandon Miller. When they're on the court, there are other guys who can shoot, who can score, who can space the floor, so that's going to help. And with real shooting threats in that space on the floor, that also just adds another element for the defenses to have to be concerned about. It opens up some space for LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller to drive to the lane, and if the defense crashes, there are guys on the perimeter who can catch and make those shots at a much higher clip than they did last year. Again, as I say, we're not looking at the league's best offense by any means. We're not looking at a top 5, maybe even a top 10 offense, but it's a very realistic expectation to think that this Hornets offense is going to take a step forward and be much improved compared to the way they were last year. That's going to be another one of the interesting things we have to keep an eye on. We know the list of interesting things to watch this season grows almost by the day, definitely or close to by the episode here on Hornets Daily. And that is going to do it for today's episode. We'll keep an eye on all of those things that are added to that list of things to watch for the Charlotte Hornets. Again, that's going to do it for today's show. We're going to wrap things up. Thank you, as always, for joining us today to watch along on the program. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, leave a like and a comment down in the comment section, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow for another episode.